Hi, everybody. Again, we're still filling in through the COVID period here, so unfortunately, the friends that are normally around the table aren't here. Today, I'm going to read the actions of the Votary of the Lotus Sutra on page 763 of Volume 1 of the Writings of Nichiren Daishonin. It's a 20-page gosho, so a lot of times it doesn't get covered. It's really sort of an autobiographical recollection of Nichiren, of his experiences through the persecution that he's received, his lifetime of trying to, express and propagate his teachings. So the background is on page 779. I'm going to do my best to read this, and we'll go from there. All right, page 779, background, the actions of the Votary of the Lotus Sutra. This work is an autobiographical account covering the events of an important period in Nichiren Daishonin's life, from the time shortly before the Tatsunokuchi persecution through his 2.5-year exile on Sado Island to his eventual retirement to Mount Minobu. In the course of his struggles over this period of 9 years, the Daishonin fulfilled the predictions in the Lotus Sutra concerning its votary and established himself in both word and deed as the Buddha of the latter day of the law. This letter was written in the 2nd year of Kinji and addressed to the lay nun Konichi, the widow who lived in Awa, the Daishonin's native province. Her son had earlier converted to the Daishonin's teachings, and through him she herself became a convert. Sometime after her conversion, her son died, but she overcame her deep sorrow and remained a sincere believer in the Daishonin's Buddhism to the end of her life. The chronicle of events begins in 1268 when the Mongol Empire sent a delegate to Japan to demand that the nation acknowledge fealty to the Mongols. The prediction of foreign invasion made on establishing the correct teaching for the peace of the land had started to come true. The Daishonin once more remonstrated with the Kamakura authorities and religious leaders, but they ignored his repeated warnings and instead struck out against him and his followers. At this point, the Daishonin urges his disciples never to yield to persecution, but to devote their whole lives to propagating the mystic law, which is Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. His undaunted struggle incurred further wrath from the regime and from other religious schools, and finally led to the Tatsunokuchi persecution. Later in his work, The Opening of the Eyes, the Daishonin points to that attempt on his life as the immediate cause for him to reveal himself as the Buddha of the latter day of the law. In the passage that follows, the Daishonin speaks of his life on Sado. He expresses joy in the knowledge that he was the only one who fulfilled the prophecy in the Lotus Sutra concerning the votary who is exiled more than once. After he returned to Kamakura in 1274, he remonstrated with the regime for yet a 3rd time. When the government again spurred his counsel, he left Kamakura to live in the recesses of Mount Minobu, where this letter was written. Just 5 months later, the Mongol forces attacked Japan. The cause for this, he states, was the nation's slander of the Lotus Sutra. In conclusion, the Daishonin expresses appreciation to the lay nun Konichi for having sent a letter to him at his lonely retreat on Mount Minobu. Okay, so going back to page 763 is where this gosho starts. And again, I hope everybody in the next day or two will check out this channel on YouTube as we will be beginning the Rajani project. Okay, page 763, the actions of the Votary of the Lotus Sutra. On the 18th day of the intercalary 1st month of the 5th year of Brine, an official letter arrived from the great Mongol Empire in which those barbarians of the West declared their intention to attack Japan. My prediction on establishing the correct teaching for the peace of the land, which I wrote in the 1st year of Brine, 1260, cyclical sign Kanoe Saru, has been fulfilled to the letter. My admonitions have surpassed even those set forth in the Yufu poems of Po Chui, and my prophecies are not inferior to those of the Buddha. Can there be anything more wondrous in this latter age? If our land were governed by a worthy ruler or sage sovereign, then the highest honors in Japan would be bestowed upon me, and I would be awarded the title of great teacher while still alive. By the way, when we call him Dai Shonin, that's what we're saying is we're calling him great teacher. There are other sects of Nichiren Buddhism that refer to him as Nichiren Shonin, which is basically to say that he was just a teacher of the principles of the Lotus Sutra. So I would be awarded the title of a great teacher while still alive. So he's a qualifying that he actually is a great teacher, not just a teacher. Continues. I had expected to be consulted about the Mongols invited to the war council and asked to defeat them through the power of prayer. Since that did not happen, however, I sent letters of warning to 11 of our country's leaders in the 10th month of the same year. If there were a worthy person in this country, he would immediately think, what a wonder, surely this is no ordinary matter. The sun goddess and great Bodhisattva Hachiman must be offering a way to save Japan through this priest. And we should all view ourselves in the same reality as it relates to being bodhisattvas of the earth that have made their advent in order to secure Kosen Rufu based on our teachers leaving that mission and path forward to us. The top of the second column on page 763. In actuality, however, priests of the other schools cursed and deceived my messengers. The government officials ignored or refused to reply to my letters, and even when they did reply, they deliberately neglected to report the content of my letter to the regent. Their behavior was highly irregular. Even if the letters concerned only some personal matter of mine, the government officials should nevertheless pass them on to the ruler for his due attention, this being the proper way of government. But in this case, the letters were a warning of dire things to come that would affect the destiny not only of the regent's government, but of every other official as well. Even if the officials did not heed my warning, to slander my messengers was going too far. This came about because all Japanese, high and low, have for a long time now shown hostility toward the Lotus Sutra. Pardon me. Thus, they have piled up great offenses and become possessed by demons. The official letter from the Mongols has deprived them of the last remnants of sanity. In ancient China, King Chao of the Yin dynasty refused to heed the admonitions of his loyal minister Pikan and instead cut out Pikan's heart. Later, his dynasty was overthrown by the kings Wen and Wu of the Chao. King Fu Cha of the state of Wu, instead of listening to the remonstrances of his minister Wu Tsai Su, forced the latter to commit suicide. Eventually, Fu Cha was killed by King Cao Qian of the state of Yue. Thinking how tragic it would be if our country were to meet a similar fate, I risked my reputation and life. So he knows exactly what he was getting into. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he was compelled to do it because that's what the sutras said the Votary would accomplish. Thinking how tragic it would be if our country were to meet with a similar fate, I risked my reputation and life to remonstrate with the authorities. But just as a high wind creates great waves or a powerful dragon brings forth torrential rains, so my admonitions called forth increasing animosity. The region's Supreme Council met to discuss whether to behead me or banish me from Kamakura, and whether to confiscate the estates of or execute my disciples and lay supporters, or to imprison or exile them to distant places. Hearing this, I rejoiced, saying that I had long expected it to come to this. In the past, the boy Snow Mountains offered his body for the sake of half a verse, Bodhisattva, ever wailing, sold his body. The boy good treasures threw himself into a fire. The aesthetic aspiration for the law peeled off his own skin. Bodhisattva, medicine king, burned his own arms. Bodhisattva, never disparaging, was beaten with sticks and staves. The venerable Arashiva was beheaded, and Bodhisattva Aradeva was killed by a non-Buddhist, all because of their devotion to Buddhism. These events should be considered in terms of the time in which they occurred. The great teacher Tentai declared that practice should be that which accords with the time. The great teacher Chang'an states, you should let your choices be fitting and never adhere solely to one or the other. The Lotus Sutra represents a single truth, but the way of its practices varies greatly according to the people's capacities and the time. The Buddha made a prophecy saying, after my death, during the beginning of the latter day of the law that follows the 2 millennia of the former and middle days, a person will appear who will propagate only the heart of the Lotus Sutra, the 5 characters of the Daimoku. At that time, an evil ruler will be in power, and evil monks, more numerous than the dust particles of the land, will argue with one another over the various Mahayana and Hinayana sutras. When the votary of the Daimoku challenges the monks, they will incite their lay supporters to abuse, beat, and imprison him, to confiscate his lands, to exile or behead him. In spite of such persecutions, he will continue his propagation without ceasing. Meanwhile, the ruler who persecutes him will be beset by rebellion, and his subjects will devour each other like hungry spirits. Finally, the land will be attacked by a foreign country, for Brahma, Chakra, the sons of the gods of the sun and the moon, and the 4 heavenly kings have ordained that other countries shall assault a land that is hostile to the Lotus Sutra. This is a very important paragraph here. This is the Daishonin's admonition to you personally, and you should take it as his personal admonition to you. I've just qualified all this, and he's basically said that all of these sages that preceded him, many of them had to deal with great difficulty, that even at the expense of their own lives. All right? And he's now basically saying that everything that was predicted in the sutras is now occurring in Japanese society at that moment, at that time, in exact accord with the sutras. So he says, because of that, none of this shit should frighten us, blow us away, or confuse us. Okay? So here's Nichiren's admonition to you. None of you, this means a lot to me, this phrase. This paragraph. Pardon me. Okay, get it together, Tom. None of you who declare yourselves to be my disciples should ever give way to cowardice. Neither should you allow concern for your parents, wife, or children to hold you back or be worried about your property. Since countless kalpas in the past, you have thrown away your life more times than the number of dust particles of the land for the sake of your parents, your children, or your lands. But not once have you given up your life for the Lotus Sutra. You may have tried to practice its teachings to some extent, but whenever you were persecuted, you backslid and ceased to live by the sutra. That is like boiling water only to pour it into cold water, or like trying to strike fire but giving up halfway. Each and every one of you should be certain deep in your heart that sacrificing your life for the Lotus Sutra is like exchanging rocks for gold or dung for rice, shit for rice. Whoa. Excuse me, pardon me. I read that almost 50 years ago, because they didn't have the whole Gosho translated, just that paragraph. Has been a go-to understanding for a long time. Am I okay now? All right. Pardon me for that. All right, at the bottom of page 764, and I knew I'd cry when I got to this, so sorry about that. Now, at the beginning of the latter day of the law, I, Nichiren, am the first to embark on propagating throughout Jampavipa the 5 characters of Myoho Rengekyo, which are the heart of the Lotus Sutra and the eye of all Buddhas. During the 2,220 or more years since the Buddha's passing, not even Mahekashayapa, Ananda, Ashvagosha, Nagarjuna, Nanye, Tintai, Myolo, or Dingyo has propagated them. My disciples, form your ranks and follow me, and surpass even Mahekashayapa or Ananda, Tintai, or Dingyo. If you quail before the threats of the ruler of this little island country and abandon your faith, how will you face the even more terrible anger of Yama, the Lord of Hell? If while calling yourselves the Buddha's messengers, you give way to fear, you will be more despicable, you will be the most despicable of persons. Wow, let me say that again. If while calling yourselves the Buddha's messengers, you give way to fear, you will be the most despicable of persons. While the region's government could not come to any conclusion, the priests of the Nembutsu, the observers of the precepts, and the true word priests who realized they could not rival me in wisdom sent petitions to the government. Finding their petitions were not accepted, they approached the wives and widows or high-ranking officials and slandered me in various ways. The women reported the slander to the officials, saying, according to what some priest told us, Nichiren declared that the lay priests of Samyoji and Gorakuji have fallen into the hell of incessant suffering. He said that the temples of Kenshoji, Jufukuji, Gokurakuji, Chorakuji, and Daibutsuji should be burned down and the honorable priests Doryu and Ryokan beheaded. Under these circumstances at the Regent's Supreme Council, my guilt could scarcely be denied. To confirm whether I had or not made those statements, I was summoned to the court. Listen to what he said. Hang on, pardon me. What a badass. At the court, the magistrate said, you've heard what the regent stated. Did you say these things or not? I answered, every word is mine. However, the statement about the lay priests of Samyoji and Gorakuji falling into hell is a fabrication. I have been declaring this doctrine that the schools they belong to lead to hell since before their deaths. Everything I said was with the future of our country in mind. If you wish to maintain this land in peace and security, it is imperative that you summon the priests of the other schools for a debate in your presence. If you ignore this advice and punish me unreasonably on their behalf, the entire country will have cause to regret your decision. If you condemn me, you will be rejecting the Buddha's envoy. Then they will have to face the punishment of Brahma and Shakra and the gods of the sun and the moon and the 4 heavenly kings. Within 100 days after my exile or execution, or within 1, 3, or 7 years, there will occur what is called the calamity of internal strife, rebellion within the ruling clan. This will be followed by the calamity of foreign invasion, attack from all sides, particularly from the west. Then you will regret what you have done. Hearing this, the magistrate Heino Seimin, forgetting all the dignity of his rank, became wild with rage like the Grand Minister of State and the lay priest Tara no Kiyomori. On the 12th day of the 9th month of the 8th year of Bunei, cyclical sign Kanoto Hitsuji, I was arrested in a manner that was extraordinary and unlawful, even more outrageous than the arrest of the priest Ryoko, who was actually guilty of treason, and the disciple master Ryokan, and the discipline master Ryokan, who sought to destroy the government. Heino Seimin led several hundred of armor-clad warriors to take me. Wearing the headgear of a court noble, he glared in anger and spoke in a rough voice. These actions were in essence no different from those of the Grand Minister of State and lay priest who seized power only to lead the country to destruction. Observing this, I realized it was no ordinary event and thought to myself, over the past months, I have expected something like this to happen sooner or later. How fortunate that I can give my life for the Lotus Sutra. If I am to lose this worthless head for the Buddhahood, it will be like trading sand for gold or rocks for jewels. Shobo, Haino-Seimon's chief retainer, rushed up, snatched the scroll of the 5th volume of the Lotus Sutra from inside my robe, and struck me in the face with it 3 times. Then he threw it open on the floor. Warriors seized the 9 other scrolls of the sutra, unrolled them and trampled on them or wound them around their bodies, scattering the scrolls all over the matting and wooden floors until every corner of the house was strewn with them. I, Nichiren, said in a loud voice, "How amusing! Look at Haino-Seimon gone mad. You gentlemen have just toppled the pillar of Japan." Hearing this, the assembled troops were taken aback. When they saw me standing before the fierce arm of the law, unafraid, they must have realized that they were in the wrong, for the color drained from their faces. Both on the 10th, when I was summoned, and on the 12th, I fully described to Haino-Seimon the errors of the true word, Zen, and Nimbutsu schools, as well as Ryokan's failure in his prayer for rain. As his warriors listened, they would burst into laughter, but at other times became furious. But I will not go into the details here. Ryokan prayed for rain from the 18th day of the 6th month to the 4th day of the following month. But I blocked his prayer so that no rain came. Ryokan prayed himself into a sweat, but nothing fell except his own tears. There was no rain in Kamakura, but on the contrary, strong gales blew continually. At this news, I sent a messenger to him 3 times saying, if a person cannot manage to cross a moat 10 feet wide, how can he cross one that is 100 or 200 feet? Izumi Shikibu, a licentious woman, violating one of the 8 precepts by writing poetry, but still she made it rain with a poem. The priest Nyoen, although he broke the precepts, was successful in bringing rainfall with a poem. How is it possible then that hundreds and thousands of priests, all of whom observe the 250 precepts, gather to pray for rain and could do no more than raise a gale, even after 1 or 2 weeks of prayer? It should be clear from this that none of you will be able to attain rebirth in the Pure Land. Ryokan read the message and wept in vexation, and to others he reviled me. When I reported what had happened with Ryokan, Haino-Seimon attempted to defend him, but it was hopeless. In the end, he was unable to utter a word. I will not record all of our conversation as it was too detailed. Continuing, second column, 766, last paragraph. The day of the 12th, I was placed under the custody of the Lord of the province of Musashi, and around midnight was taken out of Kamakura to be executed. As we set out on Wakamiya Avenue, I looked at the crowd of warriors surrounding me and said, "Don't make a fuss. I won't cause any trouble. I merely wish to say my last words to the great Bodhisattva Hachiman." I got down from my horse and called out in a loud voice, "Great Bodhisattva Hachiman, are you truly a god?" When Wake no Kiyomaru was about to be beheaded, you appeared as a moon 10 feet wide. When the great teacher Dengyo lectured on the Lotus Sutra, you bestowed upon him a purple surplice as an offering. Now I, Nichiren, am the foremost votary of the Lotus Sutra in all of Japan, am entirely without guilt. I have expounded the doctrine to save all the people of Japan from falling into the great citadel of the hell of incessant suffering for slandering the Lotus Sutra. Moreover, if the forces of the great Mongol Empire attack this country, can even the sun goddess and great Bodhisattva Hachiman remain safe and unharmed? When Shakyamuni Buddha expounded the Lotus Sutra, many treasures Buddha and the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions gathered, shining like so many suns and moons, stars and mirrors, in the presence of the countless heavenly gods, as well as the benevolent deities and sages of India, China, and Japan. Shakyamuni Buddha urged each one to submit a written pledge to the Votary of the Lotus Sutra at all times. Each and every one of you gods made this pledge. I should not have to remind you. Why do you not appear at once to fulfill your solemn oath? Finally, I called out, if I am executed tonight and go to the Pure Land of Eagle Peak, I will dare to report to Shakyamuni Buddha, the Lord of Teachings, that the Sun Goddess and Great Bodhisattva Hachiman are the deities who have broken their oath to him. If you feel this will go hard with you, you better do something about it right away. Then I remounted my horse. What a badass. You know what? This Go Show is just one of many that shows you the spirit with which the Daishonin beseeched the universe when he prayed about anything. And it was always from the perspective that he was fulfilling. I know I'm going to have white stuff all over me, baby. Give me just a second. He always did it from the perspective of who he was based on what he was doing. Okay, and based on that, he couldn't say anything that diminished the reality of what the sutra said about the person that does those things that he is doing. And that same attitude that he just expressed in what I just read, you can take that to the Gohonzon. You don't have to be Nichiren Daishonin to chant that way. Let me tell you, I get a lot of my benefits by talking just like this, because I'm of the same mind as Nichiren. Okay? And if you are too, there's no arrogance in approaching your life with that same perspective. Okay? The Gohonzon inside you is the same Gohonzon inside the life of Nichiren. It is the life of the eternal Buddha. We absolutely are entitled to beseech the universe in such a manner. So please take this to heart. That was a lesson from him. Then I remounted my horse. At the bottom of page 767, first paragraph. Not first paragraph, first column. Out on Yui Beach, as the party passed the shrine there, I spoke again. Stop a minute, gentlemen. I have a message for someone living near here. I said, I sent a boy called Kumeo to Nakatsukasa Saburo Seimon Nojo Shijokingyo, who rushed to meet me. I told him, tonight I will be beheaded. This is something I have wished for many years. In this Sahe world, I have been born as a peasant, only to be caught by hawks, born as a mouse, only to be eaten by cats, and born human, only to be killed attempting to defend my wife and children from enemies. Such things have befallen me more times than the dust particles of the land. But until now, I have never given up my life for the sake of the Lotus Sutra. In this life, I was born to become a humble priest, unable to adequately discharge my filial duty to my parents or fully repay the debt of gratitude I owe to my country. Now is the time when I will offer my head to the Lotus Sutra and share the blessings therefrom with my deceased parents and with my disciples and lay supporters, just as I have promised you. That includes us as well. Then the four men, Seimenojo, Shijokingo, and his brothers, holding on to my horse's reins, went with me to Tatsunokuchi at Kyoshi-goe. Finally, we came to a place that I knew must be the site of my execution. Indeed, the soldiers stopped and began to mill around in excitement. Seimenojo, in tears, said, "These are your last moments." I replied, "Don't you understand? What greater joy could there be? Don't you remember what you have promised?" I had no sooner said this when a brilliant orb as bright as the moon burst from the direction of Enoshima, shooting across the sky from the southeast to the northwest. It was shortly before dawn, still too dark to see anyone's face, but the radiant object clearly illuminated everyone like bright moonlight. The executioner fell on his face, his eyes blinded. The soldiers were filled with panic. Some ran off into the distance. Some jumped down from their horses and huddled on the ground, while others crouched in their saddles. I called out, "Here, why do you shrink from this vile prisoner? Come closer, come closer." But no one would approach me. What if the dawn should come? You must hurry up and execute me. Once the day breaks, it will be too ugly a job. I urged them on, but they made no response. We'll stop there, page 768.